Yep, sounds like I'm on it. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us in the session. Today we're going to discuss going beyond ERP, maximizing the use of your SAP data and your company's data lake. Today joining me in this exercise is Christina Graisman from AWS. And I'm stepping in for Dave Henry. In case you saw some kind of schedule that says Dave Henry is one of my colleagues. Unfortunately, he got corona. I feel like he did it on purpose because he heard the temperature here in Las Vegas was so high. And he's from Seattle, and he only knows rain. So, you heard it was hot and said, damn, I'm out of there. So I'm wearing the flag bearer for Pyramid in this conversation. So that's a little bit about me, which is not a lot. It's not very exciting. I'm going to hand it over to Christina in a minute to give a bit of a background, but I'm the CTO for Pyramid, and the product that we design and deliver, which is around decision intelligence, a slightly more exciting category of analytical tool sets than your classic meat and potatoes analytics, slightly more, is what decision intelligence is about. And Pyramid specifically has a very tight integration with SAP and a very tight integration with AWS on many different angles, and we'll be discussing a lot of that today. So on that note, they'll do the introduction and I'll hand it over to Christina to introduce herself. So the goal of the session is to understand how you can go beyond SAP data itself. In as much as, and I'm thinking here specifically from a Pyramid perspective, in as much as we talk directly to SAP data and allow customers to heavily leverage their investment in SAP structures. I don't mean the data itself, but all the business logic, the security, all the nuanced capabilities that are inside SAP. There's a huge movement, and we see it across the board, of people going well beyond just that stage and taking the data in part or in whole out of SAP into other destinations to do more exotic things with it. And I would say one of the most profound and examples that we have going on at the moment with many customers is to take the data into something like Redshift on AWS. Call it a data lake. Doesn't have to necessarily be an official data lake, but going to that particular stage. So we're going to cover that today in today's session. And Christina will explain the AWS perspective and that side of the picture, and I'll do the Pyramid side as well. So hopefully I covered that well. And let me introduce Christina. Take it away, Christina.
Hi, everybody. My name is Christina Graisman, and I am the head of the SAP on AWS Partner and Alliance Strategy team at AWS. And we basically work very closely with both SAP and a community of SAP systems integrators, global systems integrator partners, and of course ISV partners to help customers migrate and modernize their SAP landscape from their on-premise data centers into AWS. So it's really just an honor and a pleasure to be in the session today with Pyramid. They've got a really unique offering to help customers. One quick thing I'll say, I know we're going to move on to kind of these are the things that we're going to be covering in the presentation. But this data use case and getting SAP data into the cloud and combining it with non-SAP data sources is probably like the number one thing that we end up talking to customers about, like regardless of where they are in their journey. So this is a really hot topic that we have every day. So these are the current topics that we're going to be covering today. I think the Premier Foods case study, really compelling. That just dropped this week, in fact, and we're going to go into some detail about that. And we will be talking about, if you're interested in more information, at the end we've got some QR codes that you can scan. You can get some more information as well. And then, of course, AWS and Pyramid both have booths on the show floor. They happen to be across from one another, so you can come to our booth and talk about that. So this is where I'm going to go into some little bit more background about SAP on AWS. So AWS has been supporting SAP customers in the cloud for 14 years. And along that timeline, we have released many innovations that have really been working backwards from customer needs. And as a result, we support over 5,000 customers of every size, every industry, all over the world on AWS today. And regardless of where they are in their cloud journey and digital transformation journey, as I mentioned before, every customer wants to know, well, once I've migrated, like once I'm running in the cloud, what else can I do? I was actually meeting with a customer at Sapphire, and this was a customer who was not using any public cloud in their data center, really hardly even any SaaS. And interestingly enough, the conversation that this customer wanted to be having was around like AI and ML. So they immediately wanted to be talking about the Emerald City and the vision and kind of where they could go as a digitally transformed organization. And they really hadn't even got on to the yellow brick road yet. So this beyond discussion is incredibly important, and we want to make sure that we're really talking to you about that full vision. So, again, what we're finding is that once customers get into the cloud, they really want to be having a conversation about, what can I do next? Because they're identifying additional opportunities and additional challenges, and we're going to be talking about the data opportunity today. So, current trends. Oh, wait, I'm going the wrong way. So, what are some of these challenges and opportunities? To start, we as an IT industry have been through a number of technology adoption cycles over the last 40 years. And I think overall, we've all done a really good job, which I think is something to be celebrated. And I think one of the most successful IT adoption things that we've seen over this time period has been the implementation of packaged line of business applications. So applications such as SAP have greatly driven efficiency and resulted in enormous gains in GDP all over the world. But the cloud has really upended IT environments, right? We've all been living that, right? And expectations of our customers have changed, expectations of our employees have changed, expectations of our executives have changed. And so we are now having to deal with this explosion of, how do we deal with being more agile and leveraging technology in our business today? So we've also seen an explosion of non-traditional data sources coming from devices, new web access points, IoT sensors, social media. So there's just been this explosion of not only the volume of data, but the variety of data, most of it being unstructured, that we want to figure out, how do we leverage and how do we use that data to drive compelling decisions. So data silos, though, make it very difficult for us to analyze data across these domains. So this requires a new way to think about how we store and integrate and analyze data. So data lakes have emerged as a new way to allow data warehouses, BI, AI, ML, to leverage open data formats and modern data catalogs. So it's an attempt to acquire and curate data in a way to make it more accessible and actionable. And so as of 2020, which is the latest data we have, there were over 20,000 data lakes on AWS. So I imagine in 2022 that number has obviously gone up. Everybody though, like data lakes are not the only answer. So what we're finding is that everybody needs a data strategy. Data lakes are only one component of that comprehensive data strategy. So not only does data grow substantially in size, our studies show that it actually grows more than an order of magnitude every 5 years. It's also become more diverse, again, because I talked about social media, mobile devices, sensors, and more. And the stakes are high. So, at Amazon, we talk about one-way door decisions and two-way door decisions. So a two-way door decision is something that you can walk through, and if it doesn't work out, you can go back through the door. A one-way door decision is, once you've walked through that door, you really can't go back. And I think some of the decisions that we are making in our IT organizations sort of almost feel like a one-way door decision, because these are, the environments that we put in place are going to have to be durable and scalable for about 15 years is what we're finding. So again, not quite a one-way door decision, but certainly longer than probably, a lot of our careers in that single role is going to be. So we have to be really careful about the decisions that we make. So anyway, customers are telling us that the data in their current storage environments is costing too much. For example, a customer running on SAP BW on-prem, without the capacity to integrate across internal and external systems, is going to find that just buying more disk on-prem, it's not economically viable in the long term. So the TCO for legacy data warehouses can be more than $20,000 per terabyte per year. So the economics of cloud storage and platform as a service is one of the main drivers for data lake adoption. So moving to a digital enterprise from a data perspective, it's a journey, right? And really the goal of the journey is to reduce complexity as well as providing improved data-driven decision-making. So, and there's really kind of a complete vision here. So I'll just kind of very quickly kind of take you through our point of view on this. So, moving, typically this really just starts with addressing less complex challenges, like I just need a different report that combines, data from different sources. Or we just acquired a business and legally we're obligated to keep, certain employees separate. They can't access certain data. So we need to set up permissions in order to be able to do that. Or we just got audited by a regulatory agency and, we need to improve our user profiles that we have today. And another one, this is one that I deal with running my business, as I'm constantly telling my sales operations, my dashboards aren't good enough. I need better, more comprehensive, right? Everyone can relate to that, right? I need better dashboards. I can't analyze my business. So I think that's one that I personally can identify with. So addressing complexity, it also deals with simplifying data aggregation challenges. So for example, you don't always have to move your data. Sometimes maybe you just have to work with it or look at it without having to move it. So how are you addressing those data aggregation challenges? And then as you continue to embark on major cloud adoption and migration projects, it's even more important to have that modern data strategy that I've been talking about. So this sort of data lake with a modern data warehouse is the data infrastructure for a fully digital enterprise. And that's really kind of the ultimate destination, as we follow this journey. So again, data lakes are one component of that digital enterprise, and the era of data lakes is well underway. There's still gaps between data lakes and the SAP system landscape. And so partners like Pyramid Analytics can really help customers address that along that journey. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Avi.
Great, thanks, Christina. So now it's on. So from our perspective, continuing on from what Christina was explaining, once you've made your way to the data lake and you've gone ahead and taken the leap to get your data into a high performant, highly accessible framework, the next question is how do you use it? And the who are users, they're not technicians. And for people to actually use it in a functional way, to actually make decisions of the data, we would argue at Pyramid, you need a piece of software to do it, amazingly enough. And this is where we specifically kick in. How do we get people to have stronger, smarter, quicker access to the data lake? And I would even extend it back into the ERP as well. The ERP is part of the equation. In a way that they can drive more intelligent outcomes. And from our perspective, the SAP migration overall, if you think about it, a lot of customers are still in ECC land, making their way to S4HANA. S4HANA is the perfect opportunity to switch to the cloud. It suits so much of the cloud infrastructure, which is where we see people moving to destinations like AWS. And then the ultimate goal, once you've put everything into this fantastic new framework, is what are you going to do with it? And again, this is where the decision intelligence framework kicks in. So what I'm going to talk about now is, moving beyond classic BI in its old construct to what we consider to be decision intelligence a little bit. The best way to describe it is with this exciting pendulum diagram that we've got for you. You know, once upon a time there was enterprise reporting. You know, you had 5 developers in the basement, and they sat there, and the CEO said, I want a blue chart with numbers like this, and blah, 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 and they would sit there and program it, and 6 months later, poof, it was available, and then everybody used it. And then they said, I want another chart. This one needs to be red with a blue dot in it, and no problem, 6 months from now, you'll have it, and yay. And then over the course of 5 years, you've generated 20 reports, and everyone thinks like they've done something clever. That was also at the time when you didn't have a smartphone. Your computer took up 3/4 of your desk, and you did the letters with a dictaphone, and someone typed it for you. The world has moved on from there. What's happened? Well, we had a huge swing in maybe the last 10 to 15 years to much more of a self-service, do-it-yourself, ad hoc, what's called data discovery experience. You took the data, you built the report, just the same way that you write your own emails and your own Word documents. You did it yourself. And it created a huge plume of really data-savvy individuals. Yes, you too can build your report, and you too could do the calculations, and it accelerated time to access. But it created what we call a siloed effect. You got mayhem. It's kind of spreadsheet chaos on steroids, because now it's really talking to big data blobs, but it's also me doing whatever I want with it. And suddenly it became a bit of an epidemic, as we call it. And so we see things swinging actually back to the middle. We kind of want a little bit of this and a little bit of that. We do want the self-service, but we kind of want it governed as well. We want it to be enterprise grade. We want it to be centralized on servers, not on people's desktops. We want it to be so strong that it can talk to the data lake directly, preferably, rather than reading the data out again. Because think about it, if you took the data from SAP in this context and then you stuck it into the data lake so you can blend it with something else, and then to do the analysis, you pulled it out of the data lake to stick it into your hocus pocus in-memory engine that you got on the side, you've got 3 copies of the data. Wonderful. So much for central source of the truth. It's a complete mess. So that doesn't work. People are looking for things that get the same outcomes, but smarter, simpler, easier, and preferably a lot quicker in terms of performance. So, this is a lot of what we see in SAP specifically. From our perspective, this is a pyramid-only construct. We see an even more crazy world. SAP is its own little animal, and it requires a specialized set of tools, and then there's tools for everything else. A good example is customers who want to analyze SAP data with world-class modern self-service tools, like I showed you in the previous slide. There are plenty of choices if you're going to query Redshift, if you're going to look at Snowflake, if you're going to look at 10 other database technologies. Plenty of them all work. But going to SAP, not so many. In fact, what you find is that people are going out of their way to try and migrate the data out of SAP just for that outcome. And we would say at Pyramid, and this is a specific construct from our perspective, is it'd be great if you could have it both ways. You didn't have to compromise on anything. You've got something that runs equally well on SAP directly and on all the data that's gone beyond SAP into your data lake, and they're sitting together without you having to migrate the data or mix and mash the data. And you might want to do that anyway, by the way. There are arguments for when you need to do it. But if you didn't have to do it, you shouldn't have to do it. And you should do it only because you need to do it, not because you're forced to do it, if you can follow that crazy sentence. So this is where we kick in. And when we get to the use case at the end of this, I'm going to give you an example of that exact story. And going back to what Christina was saying, it's something we see now universally. There's not a single customer that comes to Pyramid with a story like an ERP system in SAP that doesn't also have the requirement to go beyond that framework for something more than that. The data is exploding. It's not sitting in one bucket anymore. It's in 20 different places. So this diagram, I'll just cover it very simply, is just, typically we see a whole cycle of data. It's an infinity loop, by the way. It doesn't end. Once you think you've finished the loop, it just starts at the beginning again. So you acquire the data, enrich it, assemble it, deliver it. That's the producer's job. Then the consumers are going to play with it, they explore, collaborate, decide, blah, blah, blah. And if it's really good, then they're going to ask for more. Well, that's exactly what we want. I know it sounds crazy. People go, really, more? What do we have to do? Yeah, that's a good thing. If it's actually so useful, you want people to use it. I always tell people, if your cost of infrastructure that you need to support more users is going up, that's not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing. If someone actually thinks that what you do is that useful, they want to use it. You should be worried if it's the other direction. When no one's using it and they're saying we can turn things off, it's a problem. And this is the infinity loop that we like to see our customers moving towards. And it's basically the whole idea that, we're going to get more people to use things. Now, that's a general principle. And now applied to what I said earlier, it'd be great if this was working equally well across, in this case, SAP and non-SAP data. 1 second. So Pyramid itself, in delivering that higher order of functionality, and this is what decision intelligence is about, just very quickly, it's 3 disciplines. Business analytics is the core component that everybody knows and recognizes. It's the table stakes, meat and potatoes, pie charting and number crunching and everything that we all know and love, and dashboarding. Yes, but it turns out, decisions require a lot more to work than just pie charts. Someone has to get their hands on the data. Fine, if it's direct querying, direct connect, you're good to go because someone's built you a beautifully curated data set. But in the real world, it doesn't always work out like that, and you need a bit of data preparation. So data prep is a discipline on its own you need as part of the solution with business analytics. And then the big wave at the moment is the machine learning, the data science, the AI, the ML that you were mentioning earlier. That's a big thing at the moment. Now, not everybody knows what to do with the data science, but we all read about it in Forbes, and well, we better get some of that. And so we're getting it. And it's a good thing, again. I have to tell you, in a few years, if you're not in the game, you're going to get eaten by your competitor across the street from you who is in the game. And it's just a case of getting your head around it. So our big sort of motion as a platform is to deliver all 3 disciplines in one product, frictionless, and working natively and directly on the data sources, right? So imagine, again, in the context of this conversation, SAP and let's say Redshift, and taking the full horsepower that you need to make that happen. This requires a lot of compute, and that's exactly where the cloud kicks in. It's exactly where the elastic computing from AWS makes all the difference. Because when you do your machine learning, it's not running it on my laptop and, well, now let's just go and work out across my 300 million customers who will default on the loan tomorrow morning if I'm a bank. No. That's going to take hours, days to run. You want an answer now, you need a lot of horsepower. But when you're done, you turn it off and poof, the resources go back to a baseline. So this is very much where we're coming from. So analytics on top of SAP, as far as Pyramid goes, a little bit of a plug for us. We do all this kind of fancy footwork here. There's a lot to digest, and I would recommend you come and visit us at the booth to get a deeper understanding of what it means. But anybody who knows their onions in the SAP analytics space will feel some of these pain points. You will see them in other technologies. This is the kind of thing we solve direct. And I want to make a point here as well. Because it's direct, we push all the compute down into SAP's engines. And those engines are sitting on top of your infrastructure. And it's great if your infrastructure scales, which, by the way, again, perfectly done if it's in the cloud, because that's where it's going to count. So in other words, you have 100 people who want to do a decision off your HANA database at 9 o'clock in the morning, because everyone wakes up and makes decisions at 9 o'clock in the morning. Boom, you need 50 nodes. Of course, by 9:30, everyone's tired. They've gone to do something else. They're sitting around the water cooler having a conversation, and poof, we only need 1 node. That kind of framework is pivotal to pulling this off, and that's exactly the kind of thing that Pyramid encourages its customers to do. So a lot of functionality here. We can have a discussion about that in more detail. This is just another diagram. We've got lots of diagrams here explaining how it all fits together. But this is, as you can see, giving a sense of how we would talk across all the different things here. This is just an example. Obviously all of SAP's data assets on one side and all the other flavors going across that way. Data lakes is one of them, by the way. Not everything's in a data lake today. We've got plenty of customers still running on things like Microsoft Analysis Services or Oracle Essbase and all these old analytical constructs. Clearly the data lake is, flavor of the moment as people are making the migration to the modernization of their data estate. It makes sense that that's where you're going to stick it. But it's a 5-year process, and it's not going to happen overnight, and we understand that. We're here to actually give you a ramp as you move from one place to the other. It's a big part of the story too. So this diagram is, I guess, a screenshot of the kinds of things that people are doing with it, so I'm not going to waste too much time on it. This one here is a little bit of an explanation around bringing the AI component into the game. And it's a bit of a screenshot because it's hard to describe it otherwise, but things like being able to do automated insights on your data is pivotal in the new world order of data. As we need to do more and more sophisticated things, and the data is exploding, both in depth in terms of complexity and size, and also in the number of data sources, and also the number of people who can digest and have the skill set to use it is not commensurate with that kind of ramp up. It behooves the software vendors to give every user a way to digest it and use it in a smarter way. And that is better known as AI, which is a nice fancy 2-letter acronym for we will help you do your job better with our software. And everyone's doing it. It's a self-driving car meets data. And in our perspective, it's a very, very complicated space because everybody's data is idiosyncratic, right? Self-driving car, look for the black thing, 2 white lines, drive that way. I'm analyzing hospital data, then we're looking at mining data, then it's banking data, then it's, my data coming out of the SAP system with its fandangled craziness, and then the other one's the Oracle system, and everybody's got a slightly different set of data with its own unique aspects. It's actually incredibly difficult to build automated insights off that. Nevertheless, the whole industry is moving that way. Pyramid makes a big movement against that too. Again, directly on top of SAP or on top of Redshift. Think of it like that, and it gets very, very interesting being able to blend all of that together without migrating the data again. 1 second. Skip over that one. I'm going to use this slide very quickly. 1 second. Can you just click into that? This is another example of the whole blending thing. The little grid at the top is coming from SAP, I believe it's BW, and everything else underneath here is coming out of Redshift. This is another use case that is interesting. Yeah, I need to build the digital dashboard maybe for the CEO, the manager. The data sources are not all in one place for whatever reason. We haven't put them all into one data lake. Even if you put them all into a data lake, you don't conceptually, as data users, want them in the same data model, semantic layer. That's kind of kludged up. Finance, HR, operations, IoT, ECG reporting. Why on earth would they be in one gigantic database? It kind of doesn't make sense. Yet, analytically or at a managerial level, I kind of need to see all these things to drive a common decision, whatever that is. I'm happy, I'm sad, the stock price is going up, it's going down, what's going on, big picture. You kind of want something like that. So, albeit this is only 2 sources, yeah, maybe this data at the bottom is coming from my Redshift system, to use the term very loosely, and the top piece is coming from BW or HANA, and yeah, I do want to see them together, and when I cross-analyze them, they all know what's going on. That's a key, simple example of bringing it all together in one place, and it can drive a better decision process from that. And again, we'll get into the use case in a second that describes it. 1 second. This is just a diagram again of a flow in Pyramid for doing the more complicated data preparations and whatnot. A very good example here in Pyramid, this is the data prep tool that we mentioned earlier, is people also taking the data as a business user, manipulating it for whatever reason, if they need to, which is something we prefer people didn't do. Like, it'd be great if the curated data warehouse was perfect and no one needed to touch it, but realistically, it never ever ends up like that. There's always a percentage of people who need to throw the spreadsheet in, redesign the dimensionality, change the metrics. oh, let's do that kind of logic or such and such. So something like this can help you do that. What's great about this, and the diagram's kind of showing it to you, it's not very easy to understand it, but you could start in one place and make your way to another place. In this case, we've got pyramid content, which is the first part all the way over here. Let's see if the mouse makes its way there. Which, by the way, in this case, I happen to know the case, is actually coming from BW. We're actually extracting a BW report, going through a whole bunch of manipulation, and it's actually being spat out, if you will, back into Redshift, which is a very interesting other use case. So not only am I using BW, querying it for analytics, or using Redshift as my data lake, which is where I've stuck all the rest of my data. There's also a use case where I'm going to take BW data and move it into Redshift as a business user because someone very generously allowed me to do it. And this is another big use case we're seeing more and more and more, because the organization would rather have those data mashups, those models, those unique data preparations put into the curated destination rather than some random place that the user feels like on their desktop or some, machine under the desk that's, housing a copy of SQL Server or something like that. So this is one of those other use cases. So let's get to the use case here. Premier Foods, we just did a joint publication around it. We have the link somewhere. Hopefully we can send it to you. This is a really, really interesting use case. They're a UK-based organization, fairly large footprint. They are, everything I've just said to you in a nutshell is exactly what their use case was. Please give us technology that works on top of SAP BW, but also something that works on Redshift, and their entire implementation is running in AWS, both the SAP side and obviously Redshift. And what makes it so interesting is they were looking for tools that worked very well on, let's say, on either stack. Couldn't find one that nailed it. They tried SAC on top of SAP and Tableau on top of Redshift. And finally, when they worked through the entire POC cycle, they came to the conclusion, wow, we actually need something that works across both of those things. So that's the plug for Pyramid. The other part is once they understood the way we worked, they suddenly realized that they had made a fantastic move by running it in the cloud because their compute cycles are up and down like you can't believe. And that's exactly what they need. They need that elastic compute to make it all work. So it was one of the most interesting sort of intersections of all the things we're talking about that I can point to. And it really is one of the best examples of getting it all right across the board. Use cases that they have, I mean, we've got one here that they were doing, ESG reporting. This gives you a sense of the kinds of things that we're trying to solve. And for this to work, by the way, they had to pull data out of multiple sort of data source locations. I'm not an expert on all the details. I don't know down to the grain. Unfortunately, Dave, who was going to present this, knew all the details, so I don't. But from what I understand, there were some metrics that came out of SAP itself. Some of it was housed in the Redshift instance. And for them to do near real-time ESG reporting in a very sophisticated manner that allowed them to drive the way they run their organization, they had to bring everything together analytically into the same box. What's the catch? The catch is both data sets are enormous. They were enormous. And the idea that they were going to create a third data set where they blend it all together just didn't make sense. Not to mention the problem of hydrating that third data set with the changes on a regular basis would have been ridiculous. So this is one use case. They've got hundreds of them that they're planning to deploy. Now they've deployed a bunch of them already. But this is a really good one. I know that ESG reporting is, flavor of the day at the moment. As we all feel the heat outside, we're thinking, geez, someone needs to turn, the CO2 down so that we can come to Vegas without dying from the heat. We know that. So this is probably the beginning of how we fix that. But it's a classic story that we hear time and again. 1 second as I jump to the next slide. So on that point, we're going to wrap up a little bit. We've got lots of other bits and pieces to show you, but I think this is kind of encapsulates everything, and I don't want to repeat it over and over again. Key points to take home. and this cuts across both the AWS perspective and the Pyramid perspective, I might add. Data is growing. I think everybody in this room knows that. There's no such thing as it shrinking. If you've got a shrinking database, there's something wrong with your company. Sorry to say it so bluntly, all right? There's something wrong. The data is growing. It's not just growing broadly, it's growing in depth. And we all need great ways to handle that problem. It's not going to go away. In the context of SAP specifically, we're seeing it time and again. The data lake construct is here. It's there to handle everything after the ERP framework is in place. It's the next stage that's coming, whether it means it complements your SAP data or to some degree you're moving your data out of SAP into the data lake for other reasons. It's definitely happening. It's happening across the board. From our perspective, the use of the idea of using different tools to connect to those different data sources doesn't make sense. And you really need one that connects across all of them equally well so that you can do all the blending and the analytical reporting in an intelligent way without actually, having to move the data just because it doesn't make sense. Other things like self-service is a must, right? This can't be an IT project. It has to be something that business users can do, preferably with no code or at worst low code, and the governance and all the other bits and pieces going into it. And on top of that, as companies move more and more into the whole machine learning space, and we start to drive decisions with intelligence, which generally means with that machine learning component in particular, it becomes an even more profound requirement to get all the pieces of that correct and working with the right horsepower. I can't emphasize it enough. You're not going to pull this off with a laptop. It's going to require something a little bit stronger than that. Which I might add, some of our customers haven't got that message yet, so we have to tell them you can't run Redshift on a laptop. It's interesting here. I haven't used the term at all, but federation of data is a big one. It's probably one of the best terms to use to describe this overall concept. Federated data is a movement, and this entire session is really about that concept. How do we handle the federation of data on the one hand without actually physically federating the data? I know that sounds strange, but hopefully that makes sense. So with that, where can you find some more information? First of all, AWS has a ton of stuff on AWS and SAP solutions. As Christina said, they have thousands of implementations. I mean, it's astounding. Probably.
If you scan the QR codes, you should get those links to those resources on your phone.
Great. And I don't know if, do we have the QR code for the Premier Foods use case?
Again, on that QR code, there should be a link that gets to the Premier
Okay, great. It's a nice short one too, so you won't fall asleep reading it. It's about a page and a half long, I think, or something like that. So it's good. My style of white paper, something I can read in 5 minutes flat. So please do look at all the resources. We really would encourage you to come to the booths, both booths, to hear more about the story. On the Pyramid side, we can actually show you working demos of what we're talking about, literally showing you both technologies working concurrently, live. You can see exactly what we mean. On the AWS side, I believe they're giving away 10 years worth of free compute. What was that? No. All right, they're not. Something like that. That's right. But I think it'd be great if you come and visit us. We'd be very happy to take to have a conversation with you guys and take any questions you have at the booth. We won't take any today. And on that note, we're going to end a little bit early and give you some time back. It's part of our very generous approach to everything. We want to give you some time back so you can now go and do something else. They're the booth numbers. That says Dave Henry, but that's not me. But this is Christina, in case you were worried. And that's it. So thank you very much, everybody, and have a great day.
Thank you.